Well, this is a new topic, and I'm the moderator facilitator for this session because we lost somebody due to illness. We have a terrific conversation, an important conversation today about two opportunities in Detroit for major future forward projects. And at the real estate forum the other day, one of the questions asked of all these wonderful new developments that were happening in Detroit, one of our expats asked, what about the G word? What about gentrification? How do these things benefit people who have lived here for decades through thick and thin? And so that's kind of the framework that we have to talk about the Joe Louis Greenway and the I-375 project, transformative project. And we have Leona Medley, who is the executive director of the Joe Louis Greenway. We have Wendy Jackson from the Kresge Foundation that is involved in so much across the city, and Anika Goss from Detroit Future City. Three people to talk about these fantastic projects, but in a way, how do we engage community? How do we make sure that these projects benefit Detroiters? So Leona, we're going to start with you in the Joe Louis Greenway. Some people have had an opportunity to take a look at what's happened so far. There is a tour, I think, this afternoon of the Greenway. Tell us a little bit about it and just the scope, 27 miles.
So I'll make an amendment that the Greenway now is 29 miles.
29 miles, it's growing.
Yes, it's growing, and really one of the important components of why the Greenway and the route continues to grow and expand is because of ongoing community engagement. So as what the city of Detroit is doing, the Greenway is funded in part by federal dollars from the American Rescue Plan Act to help make this large infrastructure project possible through a lot of support from corporate partners and philanthropy. But really the foundation of the Greenway is the community engagement. So the city of Detroit went through a 2-year community engagement through their framework to really talk about how space can really begin to heal a lot of racial traumas. And so as we see it expanding, the community engagement is adjusting the route because residents are coming and saying, we really don't like that route. We need to adjust that, maybe because of lighting, maybe because of pedestrian traffic, maybe because of vehicular traffic. And so the team has been very responsive to residents and community about how that route expands and grows.
Well, we see that the outline here, you're bordering a lot of cities as well, it looks like. And what is that opportunity for bridging ring suburbs to the city?
Yeah, so the Joe Louis Greenway has been an idea or concept for over 20 years. And so to be able to bring this actually to fruition is something that's really amazing for the city of Detroit. So the Joe Louis Greenway connects the DeQuinder Cut on the east to the Southwest Greenway on the west to the neighborhoods. And so now when we think about connectivity, there will be a path that residents who live here can really access beautifully designed greenways in their community. And so connecting over 23 neighborhoods, 4 different municipalities, so Detroit, Highland Park, Hamtramck, and Dearborn. And all of this is really based on non-motorized access, right? So how do we connect people in green space and begin to shift who we are as a motor city, but think about it differently. And so as you see here, the map really is a depiction of how the Greenway will connect the communities.
Do you want to show the video that, I think you have a drone video.
Yeah, if you can pull it up.
If we can roll that video and see the before and after.
So if you see here, the amazing thing about this first segment of the Greenway, this is 2 miles, and that you can see where there is the Greenway is a combination of newly constructed 2-lane paths. So one is wider for bikes, and then one is a little more narrow for pedestrians. And the idea is to connect this existing path, so on-street, bike trails, things like that, to this new path. And as you saw there in that short video, and some of you who will be out on the tour with me later today, I will be changing my shoes. But the pathway is literally going through the backyards of residents' houses. One of the really important things about the Greenway that I try to kind of layer into the conversation is, you know, there is the other side of it that talks about economic development, But if we just let the Greenway just be an open space and say, is there an advantage to communities because what it did, taking over old deactivated rail line and clean up that environmental contamination, is that enough? And many of the residents will say, yes, right? Mm-hmm. Thank you for coming in and working with us to clean up our neighborhood. In the first 1 mile of the Greenway, over 10,000 tires were removed from that first mile, right? So think about living in a neighborhood where there is ongoing dumping happening in your neighborhood day after day, year after year, for 30 or 40 years. So there is a part where we talk about the economic development, but let's talk about the environmental cleanup that has already happened today.
That's terrific. 10,000 tires. I know that as some people think of the Greenway in relationship, I know we have some folks who are now living in Atlanta, attending homecoming this year, and many others have visited Atlanta and know the Beltline. But what happened in Atlanta, to the woman's point at the real estate forum the other day, a lot of people bought property, a lot that were not living in that neighborhood. They saw the opportunity, they scooped up the property, and the development that happened really wasn't development that necessarily enhanced the neighborhood that they were living in. So you want to talk a little bit about that kind of community engagement in terms of not turning over all the land to someone who's going to develop something for people who don't live there.
Yeah, so I'll say I've been in this role for 5 months, and because the Greenway isn't built, my work has really been focused on engaging with community. So what I can tell you, what I've seen is that the city has been doing really good in partnering with residents and trying to be responsive and take lessons learned from Minneapolis, take lessons learned from the Beltline in Chicago, and really begin to think about those strategies. And one of the things that's incorporated in that is how do we think about policy that prevents those things? Because that's really what we need. And so even this morning coming in here on a call with the city as we begin to think about what those strategies are, what those policies are, how can we look at using the Greenway as an opportunity to correct what urban renewal has done to our neighborhoods and our communities in Detroit, and how can we use it as a real connector? And so thinking about land acquisition strategies, thinking about interim strategies. So the city of Detroit on August 15th, which was my birthday, I had to work, but hosted a vacant land summit where over 300 residents and community groups came together to talk about how we ensure that residents have access to information, residents are equipped and ready and are getting ready to take land that they already own or learn how to purchase land, get ready to do that, and then what can they do with land? And so we have Detroit Future City here who has been doing that work for years. We have Kresge here, and so how do we bring all of the ecosystem together around this project to make sure that residents can benefit and can participate?
That's a good segue to you, Anika, because as long as I've lived in Detroit, I did not grow up here, but when I love history, and when I came to Detroit in the late 80s, people were talking about digging the ditches, the highways, and the decimation, not just Black Bottom in downtown. I mean, it did that. There were Romanian communities downriver, it's going through southwest Detroit, all kinds of disruption because of progress in highway construction. So let's talk a little bit about the I-375 opportunity and your research about Black Bottom.
Yeah, I also have some, great, thank you. I have some slides. Yeah, and so, at Detroit Future City, we're a think tank and urban innovation center, and we didn't start out with this talking about the I-375 freeway project or even what was happening in other communities, but it was more so for us as an organization being really focused on the 78% of African Americans that live here in Detroit, and that only 25% of that population is considered middle class, and that number has not moved since 2010.
Right.
And furthermore, 50,000 or 2/3 of Detroiters make $50,000 or less. So for us, this was really about how do we get organized around increasing the Black middle class, and the best way to start was in Black Bottom and Paradise Valley. And so if we could go to the next slide, Black Bottom and Paradise Valley.
Next slide.
Well, Black Bottom and Paradise Valley are two neighborhoods within that are just southeast of here, but that also run up through downtown. And this is where the I-375 freeway project actually went through. And this was a community, right? This wasn't just a segregated place where black families were allowed to live. This is where the only place in Detroit for a period of time during the Holk ruling and segregation and discriminatory housing policies where black people were allowed to live. But this was a place where there were thriving businesses. Paradise Valley was an entertainment district. But between 1959 and 1961, that neighborhood was completely decimated. So it went from about 350 to 450 businesses, almost 40,000 people, to nothing. And many of those people lost those businesses and had to relocate into communities that they were completely unfamiliar with and where they weren't really wanted there either. And so if you think about urban renewal destroyed almost 10,000 structures in Detroit for the purpose of freeways. And so this had long-term impact. And so when we think about I-375, and I wish we could get the slides up, because where we sit right now is actually a part of that removal and relocation area. Where we sit right now was a part of that. And so that impact area, when you're downtown, when you're going down Woodward, when you're getting on the freeway, these are all places that were once thriving communities that were then destroyed. And so if we're going to talk about what this looks like long-term for us, we have to figure out in Detroit, how do we actually repair what happened during urban renewal, but also how do we restore that generational wealth? And you restore that generational wealth by making investments. And one of the things that I think is really important that we talk about, Mary, is that there is a difference between reparations and reparative investment. Mm-hmm. Reparations are definitely needed, but reparations are given by the entity that actually created the harm in the first place. Mm-hmm. A reparative investment actually makes an investment in the area that is specific, that where the harm was done, and how you could create economic opportunity and restore future wealth for the households, hopefully for the households, because people have scattered all over the United States at this point, but specifically where there's an opportunity for investment, where there was harm for Black Detroit residents that were residents of Black Bottom, and residents that are there now that are impacted, and the 1 mile area around it where people were forced to move. Mm-hmm. And so these could look like investment in enterprises, not just micro businesses, right, but enterprises, right? What does venture capital look like? What does equity investment? What does gap financing look like for mixed income housing and affordable housing and market rate housing for Black developers? Because
there was a problem with the PDF versus slides. That's what the issue was. But just to be clear, the opportunity, when we talk about an I-375 project, what has been talked about for a long time is you're coming into downtown, I don't know how many cars, 60,000 a day or something, pre-pandemic, are coming into downtown on I-375, that spur, as 75 goes farther south. And so the idea that the MDOT, the Transportation Department, has been talking about is elevating that to grade level. So how would that work? And the key is, and it is in that block, that is part of the black bottom area. The key is, do you just elevate it to the grade level and you get rid of the ditch and you're connecting Lafayette Park to downtown, but you still got 6 lanes of traffic. You still got 60,000 cars a day. So I think that's part of
reparative.
That's not exactly. And so
the design itself perpetuates urban renewal, and that's what's problematic.
And so because we don't have the slides, let's talk about a slide, because you had a very cool slide, very similar situation in St. Paul, Minnesota.
Yes, so St. Paul, Minnesota was the Rondo community. I don't know if any of you all are from Minneapolis. Yeah, so the Rondo community was very similar to Black Bottom, was a neighborhood where I-94 went through the middle of it and also decimated that community. And that community specifically went through, not only created a community land trust so that descendants of Rondo, but other people who wanted to live in Rondo would have an opportunity to invest. So this idea of reparative investment, making capital available. But because they had gone through that community process, that restorative framework process, it allowed for them to actually put a cap. The community decided that what connecting looked like was actually reconnecting that neighborhood by putting a cap over that
A land
freeway.
bridge.
Yes.
So you cover, the highway's still there, but above the highway is the bridge that connects community.
The community with green space, with all kinds of other amenities, park space, that actually contributes to that community.
So that's an idea. And Wendy, I think from the foundation standpoint, you know, Kresge has been so involved in Detroit, and I think your biggest grant in history to that date was the riverfront, investing in the Riverwalk. And now you're getting involved to make sure that there is engagement. Talk a little bit about what Kresge is doing and the foundation community as a whole, in making sure that we don't lose an option like the one that St. Paul looked at.
Right, thanks, Mary. So the Kresge Foundation, we're a national foundation headquartered in Detroit, which is our hometown. We invest in expanding opportunity in cities across the country, but in our hometown, we invest deeply in Detroit's future. And we do that through advancing economic equity, climate resilience, and overall quality of life. And I can't say enough about these two projects, and really these two sisters, because what they're doing is redefining, it's reparative, but it's also redefining how our city looks and acts with equity in the future. And so at the foundation, we've identified the Reconnecting Communities project, which is I-375, as one of our transformational investments. We're working deeply alongside Detroit Future City, Downtown Detroit Partnership, and others to ensure a couple of different objectives. One is to make sure that deep and authentic community engagement is a part of this transformational effort with I-375. And when we talk about I-375, we also need to talk about I-75, because it's really, the two go hand in hand. So making sure that there's high quality, deep community engagement. The Joe Louis Greenway has already given us a template for how that can look. And so just making sure that we continue to expand that kind of framework across a transformational project like this. The second area where we're going to deeply invest is on ensuring the restoration of the deep cultural heritage of this site. Making sure that current Detroiters and descendants are able to now see themselves more fully in the site, in the area. And I think related to that, it's important to lift up that this is more than a freeway project.
That's right.
It has got to be a project that starts to not only reconnect our urban fabric, but also do so in a way that lifts up the heritage and history and the importance of this site and what happened to the families that were displaced. And then the third area where you'll see us invest more deeply is ensuring that Black Detroiters, particularly Black entrepreneurs and Black developers, are centered in the transformation and the strategies going forward. So we're also investing in the Joe Louis Greenway, mainly in the spaces related to public art. But both of these projects I can't say enough about in terms of how they're going to reshape the fabric of our city.
So that's terrific. And just to give people who come back to visit family and come back to homecoming, the Greenway project, you've got how much done now and what's the timeline?
So right now, the first 2 miles of newly constructed Greenway is set to fully open on October the 31st. Again, with a community event that is led by the local community groups in partnership with the City of Detroit. So that first 2 miles, which you saw here, opening on October 31st. But when we say opening, it's already there, right? So once you lay the concrete, residents are not waiting for you to cut a ribbon to tell them it's open. They are already out there using it. And then phase 2, which is the next 2 miles north of that, is already under construction. We just had a ribbon cutting on the phase in Highland Park. So all of that has started to be cleared out. And as we go through the project, many will see it. One of the most beautiful components of this project is set to be complete in 2027. When you look at the interactive map, you'll see that there are some funded and some underfunded segments. But that's not stopping the construction and the progress, right? We will go out and hunt for the money, but we need to continue to push this project along because one of the things we want to show the value of this, right? And sometimes you need to show funders and you need to show partners that this is a valuable project. But 2027, and you'll see 2 or 3 more phases come online in 24, and additional 2 to 3 coming online each year up until 2027.
Thank you. And Anika, I know you're not MDOT, you're not the federal money coming in for this project, but what do you anticipate? I mean, they're still in the kind of top-down engagement phase, I would say. It's top-down so far. But how are you going to be able to influence what happens? Because this has been on the docket for a long time. It's an opportunity.
I do want to recognize that there are a number of people that are working on this. This is not just Detroit Future City, the downtown. Oh, look, there you go. Look, hey, the downtown Detroit.
We'll send it to everybody.
And I could send it in the slides, but the Downtown Detroit Partnership and Black Bottom Archives and the Reparations Task Force. There's so many other people that are really, really focused on this. Eastern Market Corporation that were affected. That I think what's going to happen, and what I really hope is happening, is that we are making space because all of these organizations are working alongside each other at the same time. We're trying to make space at the same time about what's necessary. So as Wendy said, this isn't just a freeway project. Oh, okay, let's do this really quick because this is important.
That shows how big it was.
So this is a current map. This is a 2023 map of the lower triangle is Black Bottom, the upper triangle is Paradise Valley, and the shades of red were the urban removal areas. So the large block is the urban, that was where, and that includes all the way up to Gratiot. That's where people were removed. Now, the blue area is also that's actually where the freeway goes. And I think that up in Paradise Valley, or that's the red striped area, which is part of where we're sitting now, which is really important, is the Brewster Douglas homes. And the Brewster Douglas homes were the first public housing project in Detroit that was also segregated. So people were living there in their homes and then were removed because they were building a freeway and they wanted to build public housing for white people that could live in public housing, not for the black people who were living in the area. So I don't know if they'll find another map. There's another map with an impact map. Hey, look at that. This is what we describe at DFC is the 1 mile impact area. And why we find this really important, because we believe that this is where the investment should happen, because this is where people were most impacted. And so the freeway, what I was starting to say was that the opportunity of I-375 is that it will leverage all of this.
Yes.
It's a freeway. Some of it is just a freeway project. And with freeway comes bond financing, land sales, contract procurement, other development, new development that will go in and around this project. All of that creates opportunities for descendants and other Black Detroiters.
Not that the outcome will be the same as St. Paul, and this has got to be our last slide, because but if you want to just speak to this.
So this is the Rondo neighborhood in St. Paul, Minnesota, and this was their reconnecting community federal grant land bridge that we talked about, that goes over the community, that connects both sides. I-94 is underneath. So this can happen. This is beautiful.
Yeah.
And so I feel like there's an opportunity for us to be able to do this here.
Well, I hope that people will stay up to date on this project. It's still a work in progress,
Yes.
but I think what I've heard is that community engagement, there needs to be a little bit more on the I-375. So, but I think we have some people on the stage today who are going to make sure that that happens.
Yes.
So I want to thank you all for participating this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you.